It all started the night Stewie heard something moving in his room. He thought it was Brian, but when he turned on his small nightlight, he saw a child standing in the corner. A child who looked almost exactly like him, just a bit taller, a bit paler, with a smile that stayed on his face far too long. The child said, "Hi, brother. I came home." Stewie froze. He didn't have a brother, not one he knew of. But the boy spoke calmly, confidently, as if everything he said made perfect sense. In the morning, Stewie tried to tell Lois, but she brushed it off, though Stewie noticed she wouldn't look him in the eyes. And that evening, the same child was sitting in the kitchen. Lois introduced him as a distant relative who would be staying with them just for a little while. Nobody, not Peter, not Chris, not Meg, not even Brian, remembered anything about him. Yet everyone acted like he'd always been part of the family. Stewie started watching him closely. The brother moved strangely, too smoothly, changing his facial expressions too quickly, like he was selecting them from a menu. He would stand in door frames and stare at people until they noticed him, then walk away without a word. Sometimes he would disappear into a room with no exit, and Stewie would find him moments later in a different part of the house. On the third day, Meg disappeared. Her door was open, her belongings untouched, but she was gone. When Stewie accused the brother, the boy only tilted his head and said, "You'll understand soon, too." Peter became vacant. He would sit on the couch and stare at nothing, like someone had unplugged his thoughts. Chris wandered the house silently, saying nothing to anyone. Lois followed the new child everywhere, moving as if hypnotized. On the fourth day, Chris vanished. Stewie tried to talk to Brian, but Brian walked past him without any recognition at all, like someone had hollowed him out. More and more, the brother appeared behind Stewie even when he locked the door. Some nights, Stewie woke up to find him standing at the foot of the bed, whispering, "We're the same. We belong together." Time stopped making sense. All the clocks froze at the same hour. The windows showed nothing but a flat gray mist. The house wasn't physically locked. It simply wouldn't let them leave. When Lois disappeared, Stewie finally went to the basement, the only place the brother never entered. In the far corner, he found Peter, beaten, exhausted, barely conscious. When he saw Stewie, he whispered, "That thing isn't your brother. It's not a child. It came here because of you." Stewie demanded to know what that meant, but Peter only repeated, "Don't look it in the eyes. Whatever you do, don't look." Footsteps sounded above them, soft, gentle, too controlled. Stewie and Peter turned toward the stairs as the brother began to descend. But with each step, his body seemed to grow slightly taller, slightly more stretched. It all started when Brian became quieter than usual. He would sit in the corner of the living room and watch Peter talk, joke, make decisions, lead the family. Peter was always the one in charge. That was normal. But Brian had never really noticed it the way he did now. Every time Peter spoke over him, Brian's ears twitched. Every time Peter announced what everyone would do, Brian's jaw tightened. At first it was just irritation, but then something inside him began to spiral. He stopped sleeping properly. At night he wandered the house, whispering to himself, "I could be in charge. I could lead. I could be the one they listen to." Lois overheard him once in the bathroom, staring at himself in the mirror and muttering, "Why not me? Why never me?" By the third day, his fur had changed, standing up in jagged clumps as if constantly electrified. He looked larger, too. His eyes were darker, deeper. His claws scraped the wooden floor loudly now, even when he tried to walk slowly. When the family asked what was going on, he answered with a strange, calm clarity, a voice too steady to be his. "I'm finally realizing my potential." And he stared at all of them without blinking. One night, Lois woke up to a silence that didn't feel right. She reached beside her. Peter wasn't in the bed. She walked into the living room and froze. Brian was sitting in Peter's recliner, perfectly straight, perfectly confident. He turned to her and said, "He's not the head of the family anymore." Lois demanded to know where Peter was, but Brian only lifted his lips slightly, revealing sharp teeth he didn't have before. The next day, Brian began giving orders: where Lois should clean, what Meg should do, what Chris should turn on or off. His voice had a cold authority that made everyone hesitate. The house grew dimmer. Lights flickered constantly. At night, the sound of Brian's footsteps echoed through the hallway, heavy, almost too heavy, like something large was pacing the house. Stewie was the first to piece it together. He'd noticed that Brian frequently came up from the basement, quietly, as if making sure no one followed him. One afternoon, when Brian stepped away to the kitchen, Stewie slipped downstairs. In the far corner, he found Peter, bruised, exhausted, barely conscious. When he saw Stewie, he whispered, "He wants to be in charge. He took everything. He won't let me out." But before Stewie could respond, footsteps began descending the basement stairs, slow, deliberate, powerful. Brian appeared in the doorway, much larger than before, fur spiked in all directions, eyes glowing faintly with a yellowish light. He looked at Stewie, then at Peter, and said quietly, "I'm the head of the family now, and you both stay here." The basement door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and the house returned to silence. The final scene was simple and wrong. The camera slowly panned across the living room. Lois, Meg, and Chris sat perfectly still, as if waiting for instructions. And in Peter's recliner sat Brian, calm, composed, breathing like a creature finally satisfied with its place. He didn't look at the camera. He didn't need to. He had already won. The episode cut to black. This episode didn't start the way Family Guy episodes normally do. There was no intro, no theme music, just a static shot of the Griffin house from what looked like a security camera. Peter was sitting on the couch, staring at a turned-off TV, too still, too straight. The rest of the family stood behind him in a half-circle, not moving, not speaking. The first sound in the episode wasn't their voices. It was a warped, reversed audio clip, so quiet it sounded like it came from another tape entirely. After it played, Peter slowly turned to the front door and said, "Lois, we should go outside now." Lois walked to the door, touched the handle, and froze. The door didn't budge. She pulled harder. Nothing. Chris tried slamming into it with his shoulder, but instead of a wooden thud, the sound was hollow, metallic, like he was hitting a steel wall. Peter went to the window, but there was no street outside, no houses. Just a blank white fog, perfectly still, like someone forgot to finish drawing the background. "This must be an editing error," Peter muttered, but the tone of his voice was wrong. Empty, like he was reading a line he didn't understand. Stewie noticed another detail. Every clock in the house had stopped at the exact same time. 3:17. Not moving. On the stove, on the microwave, on the phones. Even his own digital watch read 3:17. Meg tried to say something, but no sound came out. Her mouth moved, but the world had no audio for her. Brian barked her name, but suddenly the volume of everything in the house dropped, as if someone was turning down the sliders of reality. The camera shook slightly, like whoever was holding it breathed too hard. Peter returned to the door and said, "It should open. It always opened." He repeated it again and again. Same intonation, same pauses, like an audio clip looping. The house started changing. The kitchen lights flickered off, and when they flicked back on, the chairs were in different positions. Every family photo on the wall had been replaced with identical pictures of an empty room. 3:17 still glowed on every clock. Lois walked into the hallway and came back out of the same doorway she had just entered, even though that wasn't possible. She tried again. Same result. The house had folded in on itself. Brian suddenly noticed movement on the TV. It had turned on by itself. On the screen was a live feed of the Griffin living room, their living room. But the angle was wrong, like it came from somewhere impossibly high. "Peter, look at this," Brian said, but Peter was facing the wall, whispering, "It should open, it should open," in a perfectly looped rhythm. The image on the TV zoomed in. There they were, Peter, Lois, Meg, Chris, Stewie, Brian, standing exactly where they were standing now. Except their versions on the screen didn't have faces, just smooth surfaces where faces should be. Lois stepped closer to the TV. On the screen, the faceless Lois stepped closer too, but closer than she should have been. A full step closer. The broadcast glitched, zoomed in again. Now the faceless Lois was pressed right up against the imaginary lens. Lois staggered back in fear. The room lights flickered. When they returned, Meg was gone. Nobody reacted to her disappearance, as if she had never been there. Brian rushed to the door and pulled, but the wooden texture of the door felt wrong. Too smooth, too cold. It wasn't wood anymore. It was metal. Lois screamed Stewie's name as he ran into the kitchen and vanished mid-step. The doorway he passed through was now a solid wall. The windows sank into the paint and disappeared. The hallway shortened. Peter stood in the middle of the living room, motionless, repeating 317 over and over as his voice degraded into tape hiss. Brian was alone with him. Then the TV turned on again. The same living room. Only one figure now stood inside it. A tall silhouette with no face, no features, just staring. The camera zoomed in slowly, painfully slowly, as if dragged forward frame by frame. Brian looked around. Everyone else was gone. The house had become a perfect square, featureless, exitless. And in the corner of the room stood a tall shadow that hadn't been there before, facing Brian, closer than it should have been. The camera zoomed into its blank face. The screen cut to black.